Well, I guess I first want to start off by thanking Mr. Pavito for asking me to speak with you guys. It's really a privilege, and I hope that maybe you guys can get something out of it this evening. I want to start by asking you, if you could be any superhero, who would you be? Keep your answers to yourself, but think about it. Who's your favorite superhero? Now, I was interested in wondering what some of the staff members' favorite superheroes were, what superheroes they would like to be. So I went around and surveyed a few of the staff members. Well, Mr. Pollard said he'd like to be Superman, if he could be any superhero. And then, of course, Mr. DeBrava said if he could be any superhero, he'd be John Wayne. Larry Sanchez said that, and I think he's convinced that he is the Incredible Hulk already. And his wife, Sylvia, who works in the kitchen, said she would like to be Wonder Woman. Stan Spears said that he would like to be Batman. And his wife, Edie, said, well, I guess that she has to be Batgirl. My dad, Mark Hammitt, said he would like to be Darkwing Duck. Grant said, without hesitation, he would like to be Aquaman. Rocky Wiley said he would like to be Superman as well because he just loves the whole flying thing. He'd love to be able to fly. Brother Jim Davis said he'd like to be Dick Tracy. I don't know how many of you younger ones know who Dick Tracy is. Some of the kitchen staff, Miss Billy Ruth and Miss Bonnie, both said they would like to be Mighty Mouse. But Penny said she would like to be Catwoman. She's the only one on this list that actually picked a super villain over a superhero. And Miss Gilliland said, Miss Ruth said she would like to be Snow White. And she said because Snow White had a great following, the Seven Dwarfs, and she likes that about Snow White. And then Steve Spicer said he would like to be Spider-Man. And I was with Miss Gillen when he said this because he's a smart aleck, kind of like I am. That's what he said. So, but me personally, I'm going to have to agree with, I think Stan is the winner here. My favorite is Batman. Batman's always been my favorite superhero. I've gotten into heated arguments. My best friend, Blake, who does the Harding, his favorite superhero is Superman. And it's always the same argument. It's like, oh man, Superman, he can see through solid objects. He can melt things just by looking at him. You know, he can run faster than a speeding bullet. He can fly. That's so cool. And I'm like, well, Batman's cool. You know, he always wins. And he doesn't even need superpowers. He does it all just by his own agility, his own strength. And bad guys tremble sometimes just by the mere mention of Batman's name. One of my favorite things about Batman, though, is he is very smart, very intelligent. One of the ways he's always able to win is because he knows things. He's always able to put the pieces together to win. He's very clever. And this evening, that's what I want us to talk about. We're going to talk about some things that we have to know if we're going to win as Christians in this spiritual battle. And I'm going to talk about Batman this evening. The first thing that we have to know is we have to know our enemies. You have to know your enemies. Some of Batman's enemies, who are they? You have the Joker, you have the Penguin, you have Catwoman, you have Riddler, you have Two-Face, you have all these guys. And, each one of these villains, whenever Batman goes up against the villain, he's always able to win, or he's always able to defeat the villain and come out of this on top because he knows his enemies. And he knows their weaknesses, he knows how to defeat them, he knows what they're capable of, he knows their abilities, and he doesn't just walk into a situation having no knowledge of what he's walking into. He knows his enemies. And our enemy is Satan. And we need to ask ourselves, how well do we really know Satan? And it's so important that we don't underestimate Satan. We can't ever let our guards down. We have to be cautious, and we have to understand Satan at all times. Think about monster movies. There's always that guy in the monster movies who thinks that the monster's not going to get him. There's no way he can be beaten. There's no way he can get eaten by the monster. And then he's the first one to die because he underestimated the monster. And it's the same way with Satan. If we underestimate Satan, if we had that arrogant attitude that there's no way Satan can touch us, then we will be defeated. And in Ephesians 6, verses 10 through 12, finally, be strong in the Lord and in His mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. How many of you saw The Dark Knight? What was the latest Batman movie? A lot of you saw it. And the main villain in that movie was the Joker. And the Joker was he was such a great villain in that movie. He was scary. And the reason he was such a great villain was because, well, Heath Ledger played it, first of all. That was a big thing. But he was chaotic. He was sadistic. He was this psychopath. He had no concern for human life. And he didn't care if people died. That was his goal. That was what he set out to do. And his chaos was so random. It was just, you never knew what he was going to hit, where he was going to strike next. And he just wanted people dead. That's what he set out to do, to just hurt people and kill people. And Satan is the same way. He wants you in hell with him. He wants you dead. And sometimes it's so easy to get led into these death traps that Satan has set up for us. And the passage I just read talks about the devil's schemes. The devil is very cunning. He's always scheming. He doesn't make sin. He makes sin look so easy and so appealing. He makes it seem like it's the easy way to live. And sometimes sin is the easy way to live. And I think actually, more times than not, that is the easy way out. That's the easy way to go. And again, if we're not cautious, and if we don't know our enemy, if we don't know Satan and what he's capable of, then that sin is going to just slowly start to eat us up until it's at the very center of our lives, and until it's just so ingrained into our minds and into our actions. But here's the good news. The good news is that as much as Satan wants you dead, God wants you alive so much more. As much as Satan wants us to be on his side, as much as he wants us in hell, God wants us in heaven so much more. He wants us to be on his side. And it's like a game of tug of war between God and Satan, only God's always going to win. If you were to go outside and you were to play tug of war, and you knew which team was going to win, wouldn't you do whatever you can to be on that winning team? I mean, how many of us would want to be on the losing team and end up in the mud pit at the end of the game? This is a lot worse, though. You're going to end up in the fires of hell at the end of the game. If you're not on the winning side, if you're not on God's side, if you're not at His team, and that team, that leads me to the second thing, is we have to know our friends. We have to know our enemies, but we also have to know that Christianity is not a solo sport. It's very much a team effort. God intended it to be about His church and about a fellowship of people. Some of Batman's friends, Robin, Batgirl, Alfred, the butler, the commissioner. These people are important to him because not only does he care about them, but they're very powerful allies. They help him defeat his enemy. And in The Dark Knight, the latest Batman movie, think about some of his how Batman's friends were helpful to him. And he had Alfred, who was always giving him the fatherly advice, telling him what to do. He had Morgan Freeman was in the movie, and he was the guy giving him his gadgets and his equipment. And he had the police commissioner and his department that were on his side helping him out. And Batman understood that he needed these people. And he couldn't do it on his own. He needed these other allies to help him if he was going to defeat his enemy. As Christians, one of our greatest allies is the church. One of our greatest allies is the Christian friends that we have in the church. Think about who your friends are. Do you even have any Christian friends? And I think, right now we have a perfect opportunity to make Christian friends. This week at camp. Camp is one of the best places for you to begin to grow and to begin to develop these Christian friends that may last a lifetime. I know one of the reasons I love coming to camp is I get to see some of those people that I consider to be friends that I don't ever get to see. Some of the guys like Daryl and Jonathan, I grew up going to camp with them. Those guys are my cabin growing up. And I don't get to see those guys any other time of the year except for camp. But even so, I still value those relationships. And my point is, if you really work on the relationships that you have at camp, those friendships, those people that you might only see this 1 week out of the year, you really are going to develop some good Christian friendships. And it's so important that we understand that Christianity is a team sport, and that we need to be surrounded by Christians. We need to surround ourselves with Christian people, because those are the guys who are going to help us out. It's those Christian friends that are going to get us to heaven. It's those Christian friends that are going to help us defeat Satan in the end. And the last thing we have to know is we have to know our purpose. You have to know your purpose. Batman's purpose, he stands for justice. He stands for good. And he stands for what is right. He's a symbol of that good. He looks around at Gotham City, and he sees the evil that exists, that's lurking about in the city. And he decides that he's going to stand up to that evil, and that he's going to do whatever he can to battle that evil and be a symbol of good. And as Christians, we too need to understand that we are called to be a symbol of good. And in Ephesians 1, verse 4, we read, "For he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in our sight." That is our purpose as Christians. The very first thing we need to do is make sure that we are right with God ourselves. We need to make sure that we are holy and blameless. And if you want to be a Christian, if you're going to be a Christian, you have to be walking that Christian walk. And we all have friends who aren't Christians. We all have friends who are worldly, and who might be involved in some very sinful, very terrible things. And how do you respond to this? Well, there are 3 ways I think you can respond to this. If you have friends who are like this, a very common response is to just ignore them. Just sort of forget that they do these things. Forget that they are sinful. Forget that they are worldly, and just go about being their friends anyway. You might still be involved in the church, and you might still be friends with them. You just never bother to tell them about Jesus or about the church. The second response is, we can invite them to church. We can try to teach them that what they're doing is sin, and just teach them about Jesus. How many of you guys have ever even invited these friends to church, or even mentioned Jesus around them? It's something that we need to do. It's very important that we do that. But the third option is one that's a very dangerous option, and that is we may decide to join them. We may decide to forget about Christianity altogether and decide to live that life of sin that they're living. And in a few minutes, Daryl's going to come and lead the invitation song. I have decided to follow Jesus. But I want to offer the invitation to you guys. For those of you who aren't Christians, for those of you who are who may fall in this category, you may have friends who are sinful and are of the world, and yet you may decide that you want to be like them instead of following Christ. Tonight's the night that you can make a change. Tonight's the night that you can decide that you want to be a hero, that you want to be a good guy again. Last night, I was talking with Mr. Larry and Corey and Jonathan, and one of the things we were talking about is that the whole point of this week at camp is we want you guys to understand that Christianity is a daily thing. It's something that needs to be lived out every day. And a lot of times, we fall into this trap where we might get really excited about this week, and we might be a Christian this week. But I wonder how many of us just go, as soon as we get home, we go right back to that old lifestyle. We go right back to living in sin. And again, that's why I think it's so important that we surround ourselves with Christian friends. It's so important that we know who Satan is, and that we prepare ourselves to battle against it. But more importantly, we know who God is, and we know that God is going to be triumphant in the end. You know, if we know those things, and if we know those things every day of our lives, then I believe we can fight the good fight every day. And it's something that I just hope that you might take with you, even as you leave this camp. You might remember that it's so important that we stay on the good side, that we stay on that, we continue to do what is right. But some of you may not be Christians at all. Some of you may never have decided to follow Jesus. And I guess I'm going to ask you, can any of you afford to not be on the winning side? And the answer is that no, none of us can afford that. Because what's the alternative? What's the alternative of being on the winning side? What's the alternative?
Losing.
Being on the losing side. If you're not a winner, you're a loser. And that's how it is in Christianity. If you're not a winner in the end, if you're not going to make it to heaven in the end, then you're going to be a loser. You're going to end up in hell. And that's just what Satan wants. And I can promise you, if you many of you may have been struggling with this. Maybe you've been thinking about becoming a Christian this week. Maybe you talk to some people. It's something that you've been going over in your mind. If you come forward, if you decide tonight that you want to be a Christian, that you want to change your life around, you're going to be surrounded by your Christian friends. These Christian friends are going to just hug you and encourage you, and do whatever they can to help you out. And I promise you that's going to happen. And so I hope that you'll make that decision tonight. If you need to respond in any way, please come as we stand and sing.